a podcast to honor the gods.
This better come with a sacrifice.
Deus Ex Media.
Content Capable acknowledges the Indigenous people on the land on which we record this podcast, the Turungurung people. We offer our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Sovereignty was never ceded. Welcome to Content Capable, where if you're tired at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, maybe you're gifted and talented. My name is Sam, I'm your host, and joining me today is Ethan. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, Sam. Happy to be here.
Ethan, we're here to talk about being gifted and talented. Did you want to quickly share your gifted and talented story?
Sure.
It feels weird. I feel like being gifted and talented is some sort of like weird trauma that we've all lived through, and but then it also doesn't feel like it was real.
Yeah, it might be different for you in Australia versus me in the US, but when I was practically as soon as I entered school, both myself and like my teachers, my parents, they discovered that school was pretty naturally, I was naturally good at it. Like anything that academia could throw at me, I'd be able to just tackle with no problem. So it became paramount for them to like challenge me. And that's sort of what that's sort of what the gifted program is supposed to do. It's supposed to challenge kids like me who were, ahead of their peers. I was especially ahead in math. I actually, for several years, starting in 6th grade, going up all the way through high school, I was a year ahead in math of everybody else. As well as like taking, I don't know what the Australian equivalent of an AP course is, advanced placement. Basically, it's like a step above what a regular English or social studies or science class would be.
We don't have AP courses, which is I don't know whether I think it's a good thing. Like we have different grades of mathematics, and that's about it. Everyone else, like the curriculum is very standardized, so there's like no really wiggle room.
Okay. But yeah, I was in those classes by choice most of the time. The one exception that I did was my junior year of high school. I didn't take AP US History because I was taking calculus, and as a junior in high school, that was one of the hardest classes I've ever had to take. But my brain wasn't also wasn't as fully developed as it is now. Honestly, I haven't used calculus since then. But
it's the greatest part about calculus is that you learn it, you spend so much time learning it and stressing about it, and then once you've done the final assessment, you're like, well, I'm never going to use that again unless I go and study. I think the only time I've ever seen someone use it is in like a physics or a maths university course.
Yeah. I mean, for me, being a software engineer, there is potential for me to use things like that. But for what I do now, it's not really applicable. But that's neither here nor there.
Were you explicitly told you were in the gifted and talented course?
Not at first. I was eventually told. I believe in 4th grade, they were like, "Hey, we've noticed how well you're doing. We're gonna move you up." At that time, it was just math. But then once I got into middle school, then it became more subjects that I was more inclined to choose the advanced option because I have always considered I'd always considered academia a kind of a puzzle, a challenge, something I need to overcome. And it became so much of my identity that once those experiences were behind me, I almost had a crisis of identity, because without being in academia, where do I find my worth?
Yeah, it is that weird thing, and I think especially for gifted and talented kids who are told, you are so great, and your kind of self-worth is tied to your grades, not having someone constantly say you did well in the form of an A plus or a high grade, or being gone and doing special subjects with people older than you don't then have that gratification hanging around.
Yeah. It was frequent that I'd interact with people who were older than me, doing these various subjects. But honestly, when I got humbled was when I got to college. Because my major is one of the hardest to take, I learned very quickly that things that worked for me in the past were not going to work anymore. And college is where I ended up getting my first C as a semester grade, and that was not fun. It honestly kind of broke me. I was not very happy about that, because for the last 12 years, I'd had to work some at school, but this was the first time that I really needed to think about actually studying for tests. I didn't know how to do that until I got to college. I never had to.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept, and I think that what I find the massive difference between Australian education systems and US education systems is where grades become important. And I think that, because admittedly the first C I got was also at university, and it really did kind of, throw me around a little bit. But I also vividly remember not receiving letter grades until 7th grade, which at the time wasn't even considered high school, because we only have, primary school and high school. We don't have middle school. So it's about halfway through middle school, and you're sitting, and I, was suddenly receiving letter grades, instead of, exceeding, the grade systems that my primary school had used was exceeding expectations and, at expectations or below, expectations, which kind of was a letter grade system, but at the same time was very subjective, and you were sitting there, and you wouldn't know that, if I had gotten, exceeding expectations, was that, the same as what the person sitting beside me who was struggling in that class. And it was incredibly hard to kind of, I'm sure it was, put into numbers somewhere in the back end, but it wasn't shown to myself or my parents. So you didn't really get a chance to think about that.
Yeah, for me, that was a lot earlier. I want to say, probably as early as 1st grade, because the exceeding expectations part, that was definitely a thing that happened during my kindergarten year, I believe.
Yeah.
And it may have changed in that time. I was in kindergarten in 2006, so been 17 years. A lot of things can happen. But American education prioritizes, in my mind, and several teachers I know, it prioritizes regurgitation of information and how well you're able to do that over critical thinking and problem solving. And that's what the gifted and talented courses were trying to do, but I don't know if they necessarily got that point across. At least depending on the subject. It's instead of how much information you're able to retain, it's can you retain more information as opposed to can you think outside the box with this problem?
See, I almost felt like I had a different, the way gifted and talented was defined for us was different. Obviously you had high grades, but at the same time it was like people who would be enriched by thinking outside the box. So a lot of my gifted and talented, the opportunities that we were given were opportunities to go and do, extended thinking courses. So we would go and, go and do this academic enrichment thing where all the academic enrichment kids from the region came, and I vividly remember there was one thing of they're like, okay, we're going to give you this list of instructions, please make sure you read the list of instructions before you complete it. And if you read through the whole list of instructions, you would do nothing. But all of us kind of started doing what the instructions had told us to do. And it was the whole thing of thinking outside the box. And we would do these massive math problems that the whole country would do at the same time. And it was all about, beyond regurgitating facts, logically, how can you make this happen with the assumed knowledge that the curriculum required you at, which I thought was very fascinating. And understanding versus regurgitating, obviously, I think there was a part of being able to regurgitate everything, but at the same time it wasn't necessarily. I don't know. It sounds like for you it was especially about regurgitating.
In certain cases, especially when it came to classes like history and mathematics, less so in places like science and English, because I think that gave more credence for creativity. Because
exactly.
Science is all about experimentation. With English, a lot of things are up to they're subjective. So there were certain things that did allow for that. I was also a part of my school district's engineering program. Before I wanted to be a software engineer, I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, and my district had built this brand new building. We were bringing in kids from all over the district and other districts, all consolidating to one place for these specialty programs. So there was an engineering wing, there was a medical wing, there was a culinary wing, there were a bunch of different places that we could go. I was, for where I am in the United States, I was in one of the richer districts, one of the more well-off parts of town. So I think that definitely played a part in that, just based on what we were able to do, and that specifically allowed me to think outside the box a bit more. Because my senior year of high school, I took the engineering capstone course, which is where a partner and myself were assigned a problem. And we were going to have to solve it in whatever way we thought would work best. So the problem we were given was that within the building, like I said, there was a culinary wing, and the head chef downstairs at the culinary academy wanted to grow some mushrooms for him to cook with. Because one of the big things about that particular program is that they grow a lot of their own food that they use, raise a lot of their own livestock, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So he wanted a sustainable way to grow mushrooms without having to worry about weather conditions or anything like that. So my partner and I came up with this little cart that you would place these logs on vertically. They have a sprinkler system, and basically kind of create a greenhouse on wheels to ease in transportation. And they would spritz with water at certain times of the day. That's where my expertise came in, learning how to work with controllers and timed release and things like that. And that was all very interesting. And that's really the only time I felt like I was able to really think outside the box in a more mathematic setting. But yeah, that was a big one, and I was glad I was able to have those opportunities available to me. And I'm very lucky that I was able to, because I know that there were a lot of I know there's lots more gifted and talented kids like myself who didn't have those resources out there.
It's a really annoying thing of like the quality of your gifted and talented program depended partially on how, well off the school and the district and the area was to kind of be able to, access these opportunities.
Yeah, and now that I've had a chance to reflect on it instead of just being a part of it, I've grown a lot in the more empathetic side since I finished high school, and I can't help but think about kids who were similar to me in the way that they're really academically intelligent, and school is kind of boring to them. They want something more, something that they can do more with, and they just because of where they live, they don't have those opportunities. And I really wish that it wasn't dependent on, like in the U.S.'s case, school funding is partially handled by tax revenue, property taxes. So the higher value a property has, in higher value properties have in a given area, the more tax money goes into the school, and the more well off and more funds a school has. So,
and that's where, if you've got an excess of funds, you can run a really successful gifted and talented program, or, extracurriculars and bits and pieces as well.
Yep. And I was very lucky to have both of those things.
Yeah. It is. It's very fascinating. I find it really intriguing as well, of like the way different, I don't know, the way it was handled as well. I vividly remember it wasn't until the 5th grade that I was aware of the fact that I was quite far advanced. I'm guessing people had known since about the 3rd grade that I was finding things a bit too easy, and it was the 5th grade where I was really pushed. I was put in a it was just the luck of the draw, because the classes are kind of allocated fairly randomly, but I was stuck together with some very, very incredibly smart people, and it was about 4 of us, I think, from that class, that we, would be taken out and, go and do things, because they knew that we'd be able to catch up, 2 lessons in the time it took to teach one. And so we were able to go and do things like that separately. It's hard to then remove myself from other what could be considered academic enrichment but weren't academic enrichment things. But around the same time, my parents had pulled the school aside and were like, well, quite clearly our child is not being challenged. We can't, how can you guarantee to us that this isn't going to continue, where he's going to be bored in class, through... It was a high, all-inclusive school, so it went all the way from kindergarten or prep or reception or whatever you call the year before the 1st grade, all the way through to graduation. It was a P-12 school, what we call in Queensland. And they're like, how can you guarantee, because we, for high school... he should be challenged, and they couldn't. So that's where I ended up moving schools, and was immediately put into the gifted and talented program. But it was after testing, and the testing wasn't an academic testing. There was academic testing as well to kind of figure out placement and bits and pieces. But there was this pattern test that we did, and I always forget the name of it. But whenever someone says it, I know exactly what they're talking about. Where you kind of had to find the next thing in the pattern. And if you got high enough, you were considered gifted and talented, and so they would put you in the academic enrichment stuff. But then if you got even higher, they're like, we also will give you special support, because there's a chance that you are so high functioning that you're going to struggle with the regularities of classroom and assessment work. which my brother had. So I got into academic enrichment. My brother got into academic enrichment and academic support. And his twin didn't get anything, which he was always bitter about because he was just as smart as the rest of us, but mustn't have got cleared the bar in this particular test. But and then high school academic enrichment for me was like separate days where you would go and do things that were completely beyond what the curriculum demanded. Because Australia's curriculum is so strict, you don't get a chance really to do more or do more than like what the curriculum requires you. And so it was there was that, and there were other academic enrichment adjacent things. For Australia especially, it's so much about maths and English. Maths first, always maths first, and then science a little bit as well. But that my school was rich enough that they had a really great music enrichment course that they had started the year I had started the school. So I was involved in that as well, which really helped as well.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you were able to access things like that.
I don't know, for you, was it a concept of like being a big fish in a small pond, like you were towards the top of your class, and like there was like no really real way to go further up?
There were always people that were better than me. I won't name names, but there was one girl in particular that I was almost jealous of. Actually, I think I was jealous of her. I mean, we were friends, but I was always jealous of how good she was at almost everything she did. Like, she was a varsity athlete. She was, in these in the gifted and talented program with me. She rode horses. She, did all these things and was somehow good at seemingly all of them. She was a student council president. She was a valedictorian. There
was a girl like that in my year level. She was the Ducks of our grade every year except for the 7th grade, where I think she tied for Ducks or something, and was an amazing musician, was incredibly smart, valedictorian as well. Didn't take any leadership positions, but was quietly very successful in the background, and would refuse to tell anyone what grade she got either. So you never knew exactly what you were comparing yourself to. It was kind of scary, and I definitely was incredibly jealous.
Yeah. So her in particular, I liked her as a person, and I still do. We talk somewhat often. But at the time, I just wanted to be as good as she was. Even though I was at a higher level than almost everybody else, I still wanted to be the best. Because in younger grades, I was. And when you think you are, your perception becomes your reality. And people would come to me to tutor them in math specifically, teacher. I was basically a teacher's aide in some of my classes, helping the kids who were a little bit further behind as far as their understanding of various concepts, because they're just one person. They can't always get to every kid, and that's unfortunate. That they're not always able to do that, because there are always going to be the kids who don't understand. And for a long time, I wasn't sure if I would be able to explain things accurately to the kids who didn't get it, because to me, it was almost second nature. Almost as soon as able to.
And I found that was really hard, because everyone assumes because you're smart, you're good at explaining how you got where you were, how you got to that answer for that problem or something.
Yeah, and I struggled to articulate how exactly I was supposed to do these things to the kids who didn't get it, because I just understood. It required no more thought for me. But again, college humbled me, and it ended up being me getting the help from other people who did know what they were doing.
Did you, like, when you started college, did you think that you were going to be as successful as you were?
Absolutely. So my first year of college, I was at a junior college. I don't know if you have those in Australia.
I don't think so.
Okay.
At least from my understanding.
Okay.
But yeah, whatever.
For those who live outside the United States, a junior college is somewhere where you can get what's called an associate's degree. It's only 2 years. Or in my case, you only go 1 year to get what's called your Gen Eds, general education classes. And that was...
okay, yeah.
That was super easy. And I was like, this is college? I can do this.
Yeah.
Little did I know what I was in for. Because after that, I went to a state university, which every state in the United States has some sort of university.
Yeah.
There's at least one in every state, and I don't know if it's like that in Australia. But that's how it is
There's
in the United
one
States.
in pretty much every major city, yeah.
Okay. And it was much, much harder there. The curriculum that I went through was a lot more rigorous than anything I'd ever done before.
Yeah.
I believe I read somewhere that it was the second or third hardest major in like the Department of Engineering, which is what my degree fell under.
Yeah.
And that's including like mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering, chemical engineering, civil engineering, all of that stuff.
Yeah. It's I think that going from school isn't necessarily competitive. Like, it is partially, but it isn't necessarily, and you're more competing against yourself most of the time. And then you get to university and it is incredibly, like, especially for classes like computer science, or especially particularly challenging classes, I would argue that because we don't do general education beyond school, so once we finish school, you don't do any more general education, you only specialize. We, like, people who do optometry and nutrition and dietetics, and there's a couple of other courses, at least from my experience, that, you know, if you fail or you're struggling, you've got to put a huge amount more effort in to get back up to where everyone else is at, rather than, you know, otherwise you fall behind, like, basically permanently. But yeah, it's incredibly hard to go from I'm not finding this too difficult to this is some of the hardest stuff I've ever had to do.
That's definitely the case for me. I don't know if you have grade point averages in Australia.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Okay.
Love a sneaky GPA. Keeping mine above a 5.5 was probably the hardest thing ever.
So
out of 7 for us, yeah.
So most of the time for the United States, it's out of 4.
Oh, whoa. Okay, yeah.
Yep. So an A counts as 4 points for your GPA. A B counts as 3. C is 2. D is 1. F is nothing.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty complicated formula to make grade point average, but throughout high school, my GPA was, because I was in these advanced classes, my GPA could go up to 5 instead of 4.
Yeah.
So my GPA was around 4.2. You know, it was above what everybody else could do, but, you know, not the absolute possible best.
Yeah.
In college, I struggled to keep my GPA at a 3.0 out of 4. That was a B average. Which, for somebody like me who is extremely motivated to, be the best at whatever thing I'm doing, it was a little disheartening at first. Especially like my first year at this at the state university I was at, it was 2020. So it was quite a struggle. Like on top of COVID and being in a new city and doing things I'd never touched before for the most part. Trying to keep everything in line, it was ridiculously hard. And I will say not that things got easier. I was just able to understand where my weaknesses were better.
Yeah.
So I was able to articulate where I needed help better instead of saying, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yes.
And ultimately, I think that's what saved me, because there were two different occasions where I essentially talked professors into having me pass their class because I was on the verge of failing, and that had never happened before college.
Yeah, and it is scary to go from... it's fascinating. I'm having a very similar conversation with my family on a kind of similar topic of, like, having never experienced being on the verge of failure until you've become an adult and you've, like, moved out of home and you are studying and you're working towards, a goal. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing's in jeopardy because you're on the verge of failing this class that, you thought that you'd be able to keep on top of.
Yeah. And I can still say that I never failed a class my entire 12 years of education, because I didn't. But I got close twice, both in college.
I definitely failed at least one assessment.
Oh, I did too.
Passed overall.
But
yeah,
that was.
We only really and this is the weird way that Australian universities are so whacked. There's a whole episode's worth of content on them, but Australian universities can only the largest percentage you can have for worth of your grade is 50%. Like an assessment can only be not 50. Can't be worth more than 60% of your grade, a single assessment.
That's very high.
It is very high. Often those 60% assignments or those 50% assignments were pretty capstone-y, so there was lots of little steps that you had to do along the way.
Okay.
But because of that, you only realistically, for most academic subjects, do 2 assessments a semester. And because you only take the class for a semester, you only end up doing 2 complete assessments for these things. So it's a high degree of failure if you get something really wrong, which I think is why that a pass is a much a pass is a much lower bar to get over in other countries other than the US, because for us a pass is 50%. If you get 50%, you pass. And so, as long as you tick 50% of the boxes, you are, you can still, make it out alive, basically. But yeah, no, it's still very anxiety inducing knowing you've failed something and going, I need to pass this class overall because I really don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, for most of the US, especially in higher education, the bare minimum you need to get is 60%. Because of my major, my minimum was 70%.
Why would a passing grade be different on? Okay, whatever. That hurts my brain. It doesn't. But I understand why. Obviously, it's a high bar to you want to say high bar to pass. Pass is what we're also talking about, passing classes. Sorry.
Right. So sometimes what my professors would do is they would adjust their grading scale to where they moved the barrier of entry to get certain grades down. Because at the end of the day, all that matters is the letter on my transcript.
Yeah.
So I had classes where a 60% was a C instead of a D.
Yeah.
Which was great by me because it gave me more ability to do that. There was one professor that did that with all of his classes. This professor was from Denmark. Very funny guy. So I think he's coming from more of that European education model where they are a bit more lenient. And I was very grateful for that. Especially with my major, like a lot of what happens in my area of expertise is always changing. Like things that I learned in college may not apply 10 years from now. And I think he understood that, and he was able to kind of give us a break. But at the end of the day, he was just trying to teach us more of the concept of things. Like a lot of his classes were more about the theory of computer science more than the actual, like the hard coding, more like the math behind computer science and that sort of thing, which I didn't always like, even though from what my professors told me, the math department at my university originally had computer science under that umbrella, and that's why there's a lot more theory-based stuff, at least in that particular curriculum, instead of branching off of the computer engineering, which is more hardware-based. It's a whole thing.
I found that as well. Yeah, no, it's the same for us. Like, at some point, I think about a year before I took journalism, the journalism degree got folded into a communications major, which had meant that, like, you had then no majors. Your major was journalism, but it was kind of streamlined. So you took journalism units instead of, often you take like a year of general, whatever your degree is. So usually you take about a year of comms units. We took a half a year's worth of comms units spread out over a year, and immediately got stuck into the journalism stuff, and like really got into like, and it was all general, like getting the basics down pat, and then, you know, my second and third years were experimenting and pushing beyond, with the understanding that, you know, like computer science, journalism is always changing. As much as it doesn't look like it ever changes, I'm sorry, world, I promise, journalism is changing.
I think it almost has to.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Just because of the internet, a lot of the way people get their news has changed, and I think a lot of the older ways that journalism used to work just don't anymore.
Exactly.
And I don't really want to get political on the show about being gifted and talented, but unfortunately, a lot of the news sources that are more reputable here in the United States are behind paywalls. Which is unfortunate because a certain news network, I'm using air quotes here, I think you know which one I'm talking about, is free to access, which means the barrier of entry is lower to get news from there, and it makes it a lot harder for people to get more accurate information, especially in this age of people just reading headlines, basically.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, you know, and it kind of goes back to education, because it kind of, you know, the amount of effort that you put in doesn't necessarily transfer to the amount of success theoretically you could have, you know.
Sure.
And I always envied the people who weren't in the gifted and talented programs and struggled with like learning concept, because I never learnt how to study. Like, I had to teach myself how to study, and even then I think I've gotten it so incredibly wrong, because I just like am finding it, I found it very hard through a lot of my university time, because I didn't know how to study for an exam, or, you know, didn't know how to prepare myself to write an essay on a topic that I was completely unfamiliar on. and it was very easy to kind of fall into despair, which I had already done through year 12 through a bit of a mental crisis I'd had. So, doing it again through university felt like a step backwards, which was something I really didn't want to do.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear on the despair part.
Yeah.
It's like I said before, it was very easy to let myself get sucked up into, this is where I derive my worth from.
Yeah.
How much can I, how good can I do? And a percentage on a piece of paper determines how good I feel about myself.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose looking beyond university, you and I both are now working professionals.
Correct.
How have you found, now that you're beyond an academic space, finding that self-worth?
I've only been working in a professional capacity for about a month as of this recording, so I don't know yet.
Okay, sorry. So it's an open book here because it's been fascinating. I've only been working for 6 months, so it's not been particularly long for myself either. But finding self-worth outside of the number that I was getting every 6 months at the end of the semester has definitely been a tough thing, now that I am now a full 6 month semester out of university, where I'm not having people telling me I'm doing a good job, or people telling me exactly where I need to improve, which I think is where, to an extent in a lot of careers, mentorship is so important as well.
Yes, and I'm lucky at my job that cooperation is encouraged between team members, because throughout a lot of my academic career, especially in college, a lot of the stuff that I did was on my own.
Yeah.
Basically, the professor had everybody do the same thing, and they graded how well you did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, and some of this did happen the later on in college I got. When I did my capstone course in college for computer science, that was, again, on my own. I made a website from the ground up in 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And having never done that before, so that was something.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I'd worked on websites that already existed, and that's actually what I do now.
Yeah.
I do site maintenance. That's my whole job.
Yeah.
Is maintaining sites that already exist. But I never built one before. So there was a lot of back and forth between myself and the professor of web development, who happened to be the professor who was in charge of the course I was taking, which was very, very convenient for me.
No.
And I was also able
Always love it.
able to consult people from my internship, because I was doing similar stuff there. Again, like I said, working on websites that already exist. So I didn't expect that I would end up working in web development like I do now. But I was pleasantly surprised that I was able to do that as well as I was. And I am still learning so much. So I don't know how familiar you are with computer languages and how they work.
I can give it my best shot.
Okay. So in web development, there are 3 major languages. There's HTML, there's CSS, and there's JavaScript. Yeah. So HTML, that if you think of a website like a person, right? HTML, that's the skeleton. It's the quite literal bare bones of the website. It's the text elements, the links, the pictures. Like if you see like how people used to build websites like back in the early 2000s, that was mostly just HTML. Doesn't really look very aesthetically pleasing. JavaScript,
Yeah, exactly.
that's like the muscles. It makes things faster. It does a lot of heavy lifting, so to speak, when it comes to loading things in and things like that. And then you have CSS, which is what I think of as the face, the appearance of the website. That's where you get into more modern-looking websites, especially with things like Squarespace, where you can make your own websites. A lot of that is based on CSS templates and how those look. So I already had a pretty basic understanding of all that stuff, but now I am learning so much more about it than I used to, even through my internship, and I did some stuff with that. There's also a language that I use called PHP, which works with HTML to communicate with certain things on the server, and it's a whole thing that I could go into, but I don't really think I need to.
Do you find that like working on those kind of projects without an academic, like I always find like an academic deadline or an academic rubric that you're working with, do you find that what do you find the difference between the two is?
There's a lot more wiggle room as far as creativity goes, even in my world of site maintenance, where a lot of times they're just saying add this thing, and sometimes I know what they want, sometimes they don't. Like I'm working with clients that are all over the country, so I'm working with people who work at my company who talk to those people who are over the country. So they're communicating with the client and rewriting those requests to me. I'm doing my best to make it look the way they want. Sometimes they do know what they want. Sometimes they leave it up to me. Sometimes I have a better idea. It really depends. And I do have deadlines that there are certain things I need to get done by certain times. But oftentimes, it really just matters, like, are you able to get something done? And if not, it's not a one and done deal. Like, it's not like school where, like, you hand in something, this is how you did, you can't do it again. There's always improvement to be made with my job. So if I hand something off to one of my coworkers to look at and present to the client, and they're like, "Oh, the client wants this too," I'm like, "Okay, I'll do that." It's not just a one and done deal. So in my mind, it's more forgiving.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. Even though I feel like I'm submitting an assignment every time I hand in an article for my editor to read, because I'm still what they call a cadet, which means that I'm still, being monitored quite closely because no one trusts anyone in the media landscape. We love it.
But that's not entirely your fault.
No, it's not. No, not at all. And it's a good thing because it's caught a lot of issues that I have. But at the same time, like, I feel like I'm handing in an assignment and I can't change anything. And then this week, as of recording, I was writing a story about a music camp, and I went and I had to go get photos, and then all of a sudden another source came through the work and was like, "Hey, would love to chat about this music camp." And so, the day that we normally assign things to go to print, I'm like sitting there going, okay, I'm going to add these lines in from this source. And it felt kind of amazing to be able to like customize it right down to the last. And for me, there's still like an actual deadline of like, this is past the point of no return, but there's still things I can customize all the way through to the end, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's in certain aspects, the way I do my job is like, the saying of like, art isn't finished until the artist says it's done.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what my job is like.
Yeah. It's and I think that there's a lot of careers and we forget that and it's fascinating the art influences that our day-to-day lives kind of have, on us because, we're always taught that an employer would never accept that or, once you hand something in to someone, you're never going to get it back, and that's basically reinforced with the academic system we're given. And then we enter the real world. We realize that it's a very progressive process. Iterative process is probably a better word to describe it. We're not sitting there, and this doesn't just go for journalism and computer science. This goes for all sorts of careers where you're constantly refining the answer you have to a question or the process that you've developed or the solution that you're proposing until it, fits as best it can. And acknowledging that, nothing is going to be a perfect answer either.
Yeah. If I were to sum up my job in 2 words, it would be always improving. Because that's all I'm doing, is improving things that are already there. Eventually, I think I'll be able to make new things, but at least for right now, a lot of what I'm doing is just making improvements to things that already exist. And for someone who is fresh out of college, I think that's probably one of the better things I could be doing.
I would say it's like a good reset. It's a good hot mental, a mental break from striving for perfection, which is what academia basically requires, us to do, and being told that you can achieve a perfection, and struggling to, especially through, university and college, and then you enter the workforce, and you realize that it isn't. You're not going to necessarily be creating something. You're solving iterative problems rather than define a solution for X and don't think about anything else. It's a hard adjustment, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's why I was very glad that I was able to do my internship. It gave me a window into more of what I would be expecting when I entered the workforce, because there's always going to be something else that somebody wants you to do. For me, it's like, add this button here, or make this link a different color, or change the functionality on this page, and make this certain thing do something different than it does now. So there's never really a stopping point. It's always evolving, and it's a lot better, in my opinion, in the way that it's not final.
Yeah.
Like in academia, you always have a final assessment.
It is. I think that the finality of academia stresses people out, and especially myself, who went from, being very, finding things coming to me very easily and not really struggling as much as I thought I was going to, struggling and trying hard as a burnt out, gifted and talented kid. It's a very nice change to go from that to going, nothing I do is necessarily final.
Yeah. And I learned in college that I don't necessarily always need to strive for perfection. We have a saying here in the States, and I don't know if it carries over to Australia, especially in harder majors like mine and engineering in general, is that C's get degrees. Because oftentimes...
Fours open doors is ours.
Gotcha. So, it is 4 like the middle of the
4's your
the
passing
GPA?
grade. So
okay.
3... Yeah, your 3's your low fail, and then Year 2 is your anyone who gets a 3 usually gets an opportunity. There's a whole other thing where you can get an opportunity to kind of like save your grade a bit, which is a funny concept in the university system.
Okay. Yeah. So
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, those are words that I lived by for probably the last 3 years, until a couple of months ago when I graduated from college.
Yeah.
As of this recording.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think on that note, thank you so much, Ethan, for coming on the podcast. It's been lovely to chat to you.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Yeah, where can people find you on the internet?
So people can find me. I mostly do Instagram now. I'm on Threads too, because I need to fill the Twitter void now that that's gone down the toilet. Same handle for both of those at ethan.t.hewlin. That's Hulen. My name will probably be in the title of this episode, so if you look that up, you'll be able to find me. I mostly repost other people's stuff. Sometimes I'll have a thought here and there, but I mostly observe. Nothing too crazy over there.
Yeah. Awesome. And has there been anything that you've been reading, watching, listening to, playing that you wanted to plug?
I'm going to plug The Bear on Hulu, if anyone is interested in that. A friend of mine, you actually know this person, they got me into that show because as a hobby of mine, I really like to cook. I love to... it's a way for me to get my creative side going and kind of experiment with things, and because my job is so logical, I need a place to express creatively, and that's the way that I do it. So watching other people do it at such a higher level than I do is really entertaining to me. So
yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, you can find me at sam.the.journalist on Instagram and on TikTok. You can find me on Twitter. I'm just not going to tell you where. It's there. I don't know. I'm holding out. I think journalists will be the last to leave Twitter in droves. But I'm also... you can find the podcast at Content, the letter N, Capable on Instagram as well. Check it out there. More memes and videos are plenty coming. I'm going to plug this week a concept. Catching the train instead of flying. I think I've plugged something similar before. But I recently... So I live 2 hours away, a 2-hour drive away from Melbourne, which is the biggest city by landmass in the country. And I live an 8-hour drive away from Sydney, which is the biggest city in the country by population. And living between the two, there's a railway line that runs between them. And so instead of driving to an airport, going through security and flying, I caught the train. It was about equivalent price for me. I think for most people who pay more for flying than I do, it would probably be cheaper, and it is. It's most of the time it's cheaper catching the train, and it was really lovely. I caught the train. It was like 9 o'clock at night. I got into Sydney at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and yes, I was absolutely exhausted, but like I then had a whole day. Like I was dropped off in the middle of the city, had a whole day to do whatever I want, and then I caught the train back on like a Sunday night and rocked up in the town with the railway station closest to me at 5 a.m. in the morning, and was able to rock up to work. So I felt like I had a full weekend away instead of like having to fly somewhere and all the security and bits and pieces that you have to go through.
I wish we had better rail in the U.S. than we do. It's tragic.
Your rail is amazing. I rock up to the US and I'm like, I want to catch the nearest train I can find because it's better than Australia's. So our city, like our city public transport's great, but between towns and cities in the country, not at all.
That's about where I am.
Yeah.
Like in the biggest city closest to where I live, there's there's streetcars that go around.
Yeah.
And public buses and things like that, but like we don't have, like in the US we have Amtrak, which can go between cities, but that's mostly on the East Coast.
Yeah.
I kind of wish that Amtrak would expand to do like out to the Midwest where I am and out to the West Coast, but that's neither here nor there.
We can always fight for a bit more. I definitely think that, I don't know, there's definitely moves to further invest, which I'm really hoping for. Sorry. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Ethan, for coming on the podcast. It's been lovely to chat.
Thanks for having me, Sam.
Content and Capable was recorded, edited, and produced by Samuel O'Brien. You can follow the podcast at Content, the letter N, Capable on Instagram, and you can find it on Facebook. You can also send an email through to contentandcapablepod@gmail.com with any of your thoughts, queries, or concerns. The best way to support the podcast is to leave a review on your preferred podcatcher so more people can hear the podcast. The art was done by Opia, and the music was written, edited, and produced by Jason Hilton. Content and Capable is proud to be a part of the Deus Ex Media Network, where you can find a podcast for any of your nerdy interests.
We are
Not the crystal gems.
We are the Bits,
The bits, the bits, the bits.
a Steven Universe review podcast
Celebrating the 10th anniversary.
of a show that's very near and dear to our hearts,
So get ready to cry with us
and try our best not to sing.
as we rewatch one of the gayest shows of the 2010s,
New episodes coming out to you every Friday.
featuring your favorite host, Charlie.
And Robert.
Thank you for listening to Content and Capable. Don't forget to rate and review, and we'll see you next week for another episode.
Deus Ex Media.